Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 8, Prayers by Queen Kunti. Today's verse will be number 25. Please repeat. I wish that all those calamities would happen again and again, so that we could see you again and again. For seeing you means that we will no longer see repeated births and deaths. Vipara santutashasvat tatra tatra jagadguru bhavato darshanam yat syad punar bhavadarshanam vipada calamities santu let there be ta all shashvat again and again tatra there tatra and there jagat guru O Lord of the universe bhavata your darshanam meeting yet that which syad is apunart apana not again bhavadarshanam seeing repetition of birth and death. Purport. Generally the distressed, the needy, the intelligent, and the inquisitive who have performed some pious activities worship or begin to worship the Lord. Others who are thriving on misdeeds only, regardless of status, cannot approach the Supreme due to being misled by the illusory energy. Therefore, for a pious person, if there is some calamity, there is no other alternative than to take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. Constantly remembering the lotus feet of the Lord means preparing for liberation from birth and death. Therefore, even though there are so-called calamities, they are welcome because they give us an opportunity to remember the Lord, which means liberation. One who has taken shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord, which are accepted as the most suitable boat for crossing the ocean nations, can achieve liberation as easily as one leaps over the holes made by the hoofs of a calf. Such persons are meant to reside in the abode of the Lord, and they have nothing to do with a place where there is danger in every step. This material world is certified by the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita as a dangerous place full of calamities. Less intelligent persons prepare plans to adjust to those calamities without knowing that the nature of this place is itself full of calamities. They have no information of the abode of the Lord, which is full of bliss and without a trace of calamity. The duty of the sane person, therefore, is to be undisturbed by worldly calamities, which are sure to happen in all circumstances. Suffering of all sorts of unavoidable misfortunes, one should make progress in spiritual realization because that is the mission of human life. The spirit soul is transcendental to all material calamities. Therefore, the so-called calamities are called false. A man may see a tiger swallowing him in a dream, and he may cry for this calamity. Actually, there is no tiger, and there is no suffering. It is simply a case of dreams. In the same way, all calamities of life are said to be dreams. If someone is lucky enough to get in contact with the Lord by devotional service, it is all gain. Contact with the Lord by any one of the 9 devotional services is always a step forward on the path going back to Godhead. So pada means foot, and there's sampade, vipade, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur sings in his famous bhajan. Of course, all his bhajans are famous. Everyone's a hit. Sampade, vipade. That as we move through the world, there will be inevitable fortunes that come to us, sampade, and vipade means we'll step in the wrong place. And that comes of its own accord. It's natural that walking in the material world is never straightforward. In fact, if anybody's had an astrological chart done, everybody's chart is the same. The astrologer looks and says, oh, this is very good. Huh? And this is very bad. All right. See? This is very bad. And the person, what do you mean bad? How bad? And they go, no, it's okay. But that part's not okay. We are subjected to the influence of the modes of nature. Chibir gunamaya bhavere be sarvamidam jagat mohitam nabijananti mamebhya paramabhyam. In contact with 3 modes of material nature, we're like play dolls. We're being pushed from one place to the next. Sometimes described as habudubu, which is the sound of bubbles coming up when you're drowning. Habudubu, Bengali. Any Bengalis? Habudubu. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, you're drowning in this material world, there's bubbles coming up. So, here Queen Kunti is recognizing that the material world is full of danger, calamity. But she's appreciating that when there's calamity, she's inclined to call out to Krishna, especially inclined. And so we read the Mahabharata, we see that Krishna's always been there with Kunti, protecting. And this mood, she says, please let the calamities come. Actually, she didn't say please, she said the calamities are going to come. But I'm not resisting them because when they come, I recognize that I take deepest shelter of Krishna. We have these moments in our lives which are called teachable moments. Most of the time, nobody can teach me anything because I know everything. But in times when I'm embarrassed, in times when I make a mistake, in times when a calamity comes to me unsought, that's the time when I think, oh, I'm such a fool. Why don't I take shelter of Krishna? So Kunti's bringing this point to bear, and it's an important point because Brahma says, and you knew I was going to quote this verse, that the quintessential way to live is with the attitude that everything that happens to me in this life is meant to teach me a lesson so that I can be a better servitor of Krishna. That's it. And he goes on to say that if you can develop this mood, that the chastisement I get in this world, either through the words of a senior or through the material nature, is my teacher. And I take it as a blessing. You're eligible to go back to Godhead. Tatenu kampam susamikshamano punjana evatma katam vipakam hridvag vapurvir padadam namaste jiveta yomukti pade sadaya bhak. The verse I just mentioned in English. And it's really how we look at the world that determines whether we're able to have that attitude or not. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that it's consequential, that everything we do is consequential because it adds up to a predominant mood that we have in life. All of our association, everything we read, everything we hear, it all develops our sense, our worldview, our feeling about life, our various attractions and detestments. Some things we're attracted to, some things we detest. This is all conditioning by the modes of material nature. Icha, dvesha, sumutena, dvandva, mohena bharata. Krishna says, everyone who's conditioned in this world has love for some object and hate for another. And sometimes the object you love, then you hate it later. And the object you hated, you love it later. This is the churnings of material nature. And when we're in association with the modes of material nature, Purusha prakriti stohi bhunkte prakriti jangunam, when we're acting as the Purusha in this world, we're not Purushas, we're Krishna Das, we're servitors, but when we act as Purusha, when we have that mindset that I'm going to try to enjoy nature, then Krishna says that Sarasat Yonishu, we're conditioned by nature because of our association with nature. Purusha prakriti stohi bhunkte prakriti jangunam karanam guna sangosya sarasat yoni janmasu. The cause of our various dispositions and the way we hate some things like other things is because of our association with the modes of material nature. So Kunti says all of this is bad, actually. And therefore, when I'm subjected to reversals of fortune and I'm jarred by it, and therefore I take shelter of Krishna, that this is a blessing. Oftentimes when there's a reversal, I take shelter of pitying myself, or I become a victim and think, I go on television, and why do bad things happen to good people? There must be no God. So how could anything bad happen to me? But this is not a helpful attitude. The helpful attitude is that I'm incompatible with nature, and therefore there are going to be inconveniences, to say the least, in the material nature. I should learn to be dhīra, which means steady. Whether my stocks are up or my stocks are down, I stay the same. My philosophy is the same, whatever happens. And that is, I go on serving Krishna. No stop. No interruption whatsoever. And when one is able to, by the association of devotees and the Shastras, develop such an attitude and go on steadily throughout life, without stoppage, never stopping chanting Hare Krishna and never stopping one's service, then Mamchayo Vyabhicharena Bhakti Yogena Sevate Saguna Samatitaitan Brahmabhuya Yokalpate. One can rise above the modes of material nature altogether and enter into devotional service proper. Or by continuing one's devotional service, one naturally rises above the material modes of nature. Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridyan Takstohi Badrani Vidunoti Surit Satam Nashta Praishu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki tadarajastamo bhava kama lobhadayasche chetaiterana vidam stitam satte prasidati evam prasanna manaso bhagavad bhakti yogata bhagavad tattva vijnanam mukta sangha sujayate pitite hridaya grantischajante sarva samsaya shyante chasya karmani drishteva anishvare. There's a way in which Bhagavatam says in one paragraph that if you go on hearing about Krishna, you won't stop in any circumstance, then Krishna will help you within the heart overcome cherished desire to enjoy material worlds, and then the knot will be cut and you'll be free from going on in that way. One of my favorite stories in the Bhagavatam is in Prithu Maharaj, 4th canto. Prithu Maharaj is an empowered incarnation of the Lord to show how to organize, how to do management, how to be a king. And he was doing his duty, showing how to do yajna. He had performed 99 Ashwamedha yagyas. Extremely expensive and difficult to do, but he was so opulent and powerful he was able to do it. There's only one other person who had done more than 99, and that was Indra. And the day that Prithu Maharaj set up his 100th Ashwamedha yajna, it was ready to go, Indra came and disturbed the yajna because he was envious that somebody else would tie him up. He didn't want to be tied, but to speak of past, surpassed. So he stole the horse. He dressed up as a sannyasi. Again and again he came and stole the horse. Prithu Maharaj became angry, finally, at being disturbed in his duty. He became so angry that he wanted to kill he wanted to kill Indra. And with that intention, he raised his weapons, and then the priest at the sacrifice said, wait a minute, this sacrifice, no killing here by you. It's not your duty. We'll kill him. They said, we'll chant a mantra to suck him into the sacred fire, and Indra will be sacrificed in the fire by our mantras. And just before that happened, then Brahma appeared to mitigate the situation. And he spoke to Prithu and told him that if you try to adjust to the calamities through material means, then you'll enter deeper and deeper into the darkness of anxiety. You'll never come to the end of it. He said, best to take shelter of the Lord and tolerate. And Prabhupada writes in this purport, we see from history even the most pious and religious of people in the world have suffered great reversals in their lives. He said, but we should heed the words of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita and tolerate these things when they are destined. Then we see destiny coming. We should just take shelter of Krishna, and you can think of Parikshit Maharaj also. He's quintessential example of this kind of tolerance in the face of calamity. In fact, he's mentioned by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Sanatana Goswami. When Sanatana Goswami was describing the qualities of an advanced devotee, he said, Parikshit Maharaj was cursed by a young boy who was whimsical in his cursing. We all know the story that Parikshit Maharaj had uncharacteristically lost his temper when he was hunting in the forest, and he had gone into hermitage of a sage wanting water. He was thirsty and angry and grumpy. And when the sage didn't recognize him because he was in a samadhi, Parikshit Maharaj became indignant, and he stepped outside the hermitage, found a dead snake, came back in, wrapped it around the neck of this meditating sage and walked out. And when the word spread, the son of the sage, Shringi, then cursed Parikshit Maharaj. He had some Brahma Tejas little remnant of it before Kali Yuga began. And the curse, he uttered the curse. The news was passed to Parikshit Maharaj. Sometimes when we do something, we're just waiting for, as they say, the shoe to drop. There's a way that we know we made a transgression and what's going to come to me. How many transgressions we've made, we don't know. It could have been 100 lifetimes ago we made major transgressions. And everyone in the material world is waiting for the other shoe to drop. Means anything can happen at any time. And I may claim ignorance, but the Shastras say, no, you've been here the whole time. And it's impossible not to transgress one way or another in the material world. There's so many yajnas people are required to do. For instance, there's yajnas every day that households are supposed to do to indemnify themselves from inevitable sins that they commit by cooking. When you cook, you kill living beings. Even vegans. When you walk, you kill living beings. When you breathe, you kill living beings. When you filter water, you kill living beings. When you grind spices, you kill living beings. And therefore, there's these pancha yajnas you're supposed to do every day to counteract it. But you can't keep up. There's so many that we'll never be able to counteract them all, tit for tat, going individually. So Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita an amazing offer. Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvang sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shucha. If you find yourself with so much debt to pay that you can never repay it, not in this lifetime or in a million lifetimes, trying to work hard, even if you get an MBA and a steady job, which is really hard to get nowadays, and you work as hard as you can, you only pay off a tiny portion of the debt, insignificant amount. So when you find yourself in a hole, the philosophy of holes is stop digging. And the solution Krishna gives is just surrender to me, and I'll deliver you from all sinful reaction. Like going into the court, declaring bankruptcy. I can't pay off the debt, therefore take shelter of the judge. Please give me bankruptcy protection from all my creditors so I can rearrange my life. So this is the only option, is to take shelter of Krishna. And Kunti Devi is pointing out to us in this remarkable verse that people generally read and then reread and think, oh, how would I ever think like that? Most people are thinking, let me avoid any inconvenience in life. That's why they have those cars made by, I don't know who makes the Suburban. Have you ever seen a Suburban car? It's a big SUV. It's not even an SUV, it's a living room with wheels on it. Cup holders all over the place, stereo, everything. You can lounge around in your little, not little, in your big vehicle and drive around. And I don't want any inconvenience in any direction. Could you make the seat a little softer and somewhere to lean? Everyone wants to drive around the material world and not be inconvenienced in the slightest. Any living being, even squirrels or rabbits, or everyone wants to live in peace, but nobody can live in peace here in this world. It's constant inconvenience. So an intelligent person then hears this verse and signs up and says, I'm going to change the way I look at the world. I'm going to use every day to upgrade my consciousness, to amend the way I look at the world, the way I treat others, the way I think of myself, the way I think of the goal of life. And the goal of life is mentioned at the very beginning. It follows the principles of the 7 habits of highly successful people. Just start with the end in mind. That's how the Bhagavatam starts. Parikshit Maharaj, well, what's the end? And ante narayana smriti. If you can remember God when you leave your body, you win. Because that's the purpose of life. There's no other purpose besides that. And if you get diverted and you forget that, and you think, I'm meant to be comfortable, let me get a Suburban. Nothing wrong with Suburbans. I mean, for those of you who have one, we can use it. But try to focus on using your life to remember Krishna and come to welcome whatever adversity comes, because then it's an opportunity to practice what Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita when he says, learn to tolerate. It's one of his main messages, tolerate. You may think, well, that's nothing. It's kind of nothing. It means when waves come to you, waves of anger, waves of frustration, due to social intercourse, due to reversals of fortune, then learn to be steady. And the only way to be steady is to remember, my life is for reformation, it's for purification. If I can take the punishment of the Master as a reward, thank you, Master. If I can take the reversal as an opportunity to dig deeper into my conviction that I need purification, thank you, I needed that, then one's eligible to go back home, back to Godhead. And that's the sum and substance of the teachings, and this is Queen Kunti's flag she's flying to show to all devotees. Vipara santata shashvat tatra tatra jagad guru. Oh my Lord, Guru of the universe, she calls him, Jagad Guru. Bhavato darshanam yat syad apunar bhavadarshanam. That if I'm able to remember you and take shelter of these principles of you're my only shelter, and I'm going deeper into the mood of taking your shelter when reversals come, then such a person will no longer see repeated birth and death. Apunar, no more. Punar means again, and apunar means never again. Bhava means the material world. Bhava means that which is always changing into something else. Darshanam, I won't see that repeated birth and death. Won't have to come back into the morass of the material world again if I can develop this attitude. So we're so grateful to Queen Kunti to give us this insight into her life by speaking these prayers, and to all the great sages, Shukadeva Goswami, for recounting it to Parikshit Maharaj. It is our North Star to develop this attitude in life. And now we take some reflections or questions. We have some time, little time, I think. If someone tells me when we have to stop because we have a seminar this morning, we'll take a few questions. And you can ask about anything if you want, because I think tomorrow we have initiations, and then Monday, Nirakula and I are going back, Krishna willing, and United Airlines willing, to the Balaram's appearance day at ISV. So now if you have any questions whatsoever, you want to bring up anything from any of the classes, or you have something you've been waiting to spring on somebody for a long time, feel free. Yes?
It was interesting, Maharaj, you were saying about suburban, and that when you drive a luxury, but then it's enjoyment in the material world without Krishna, but then time to go to get the gasoline, and then you waste 40 liters an hour in that part, so this is your suffering, and that in the Srimad Bhagavatam that we mentioned this 10th canto, that you have to tolerate all the suffering that comes. And Srila Prabhupada in purport says that material world was created actually for us, that we can actually enjoy it without Krishna. But then later on we have to pay the price. So I mean, you enjoy it, then you go to gas station and you pay a price and you enjoy it.
Just a disclaimer again to all suburban owners, no offense. It's not, it was just an example. Anything can be used in Krishna's service, including a suburban. But it's just the idea of, anyway, you get the idea. Yes?
Thank you. So in today's purport, Prabhupada says, the spirit soul is transcendental to all material calamities, therefore the so-called calamities we call false. And he gives the example of a dream. So I'm trying to connect this statement about the falsity of suffering, and by extension the falsity of pleasure also, just the falsity of the material world, with other statements where Prabhupada criticizes the impersonalist perspective. The impersonalists say that Brahma, Satyam, Mitya, the world material is all false, only Brahman is real. And Prabhupada says, no, that's not correct, because it comes from the supreme real, so it's also real. So what does it mean to understand the universe as real, but also apparently false? How does that reconcile?
In the semantics, because if we give clear definition to the word false, and Prabhupada does several times in his purports, false doesn't mean that it's the falsity mentioned by the Mayavadis, that it doesn't exist. Everything exists in one way or another, but the definition of, or the context for this kind of falsity is given by Kṛṣṇa to Brahma in the Srimad Bhagavatam Chatra Shloki, where he says, Ritirtham yat pratiyeta na pratiyeta chatmani tadvidyara manomayam yata bhaso yatatamaha. He gives this point that everything's real. There is nothing that's false, because everything's Krishna's energy. Even the material energy is Krishna. But it's an inferior energy, and it's bhava. It's constantly changing. And when you forget Krishna and you don't seek the origin of the material nature and you think it's something else, bhayam dvitiya abhinibheshatasya dishat apetasya viparyo smriti, you see something separate from God. That's the illusion of the soul. The Mayavadis have a convoluted philosophy where they say it actually doesn't exist at all. We say it does exist, but you're misinterpreting it. You've forgotten the origin of it due to ignorance or ignorance. And therefore, fear arises and darkness arises from this phenomena of ignoring what's right in front of your face. And that's the falsity of it. The suffering of a person in a dream is real, because they're experiencing, although it's a temporary, illusory appearance of a tiger, they still feel scared. Abhayam dvitiya abhinibheshatasya, because they've lost context of who they are. They've forgotten that. Do you want to ask more to try to clarify it? Okay. Yes. Okay, 1, 2. We're swinging this way right after Naharidev.
Thank you so much. So, 2 questions. The first one is, you mentioned that there has to be an attitude adjustment, especially when we have these teachable moments. So for a practitioner who's trying to practice spiritual life, is there anything they need to do apart from this, where they say, okay, this is something that I've been given by circumstances and I have to learn how to deal with it, to take this, to improve my service to the Lord and change my attitude?
Is there anything else you have to do besides that?
Yes.
Yeah, because... I'm sorry? Can I rephrase the question? Paraphrase. There's a way in which Narhari Prabhu is asking, besides changing one's attitude and tolerating what happens and seeing it as a kind of purification, is there anything else you have to do besides that? Is that what your question is?
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah. There's lots of stuff we have to do. Because even though this is the ideal, we have to process what happens to us. For instance, if a relative, let's say your mother passes away, it's not that you won't have a heavy heart. Even if you're very advanced devotee. There's a psychic umbilical cord attached to your mother, even after you cut the umbilical cord at birth. And there'll be a sense of loss. And one will inevitably go through a grieving period just as much as if you cut yourself accidentally while you're cutting something in the kitchen, apples, and you get a cut. It's not that, oh, I'm a devotee, and therefore it didn't cause a cut, and there's no blood and there's no healing process. There is. So in a similar way, when we move about the material world, we will be subjected to various circumstances that cause us mental perturbance. And we may have to go through processes. For instance, after Kṛṣṇa, you find in the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna attended the last rites. There's so many people died, family members died in the war. So Krishna didn't just tell everybody, stay home, you're not your body, you don't have to go to the funeral. He was at the funeral. He helped perform the last rites. He poured water, which was a kind of closure for everybody, that this has happened, let's get through it. So there's a way in which, as we live in the world, we have to deal with both aspects of our existence. One of the aspects is illusory, or I should say temporary. It's a nityam, it's not permanent, the body that we get. Nonetheless, we still have to contend with it, with the body and the mind. So there may be other measures that we take simultaneously as we're imbibing the lesson that we're getting from Krishna. It's part of the process So we don't become inhuman. In fact, Krishna says in the Gita that the Parama Yogi, the topmost yogi, he says, Atmaupam yena sarvatra samam pasityo arjuna sukham vadiyadi vadukam sayogi paramomataha, is the one who's understood that the material world is fraught with calamity. And he or she has been through it and knows that the suffering, although temporary, is acute and it hurts. And therefore such a person has atmaupamyena, has empathy for others, because he knows, okay, it's illusory, but you still hurt. I think it was expressed best by my godbrother Mahamuni in St. Louis, circa 1980, when he had the flu. And he was in the brahmachari ashram in a sleeping bag on the ground, which is what you do when you get sick in the brahmachari ashrams. Lie on the ground for a week. And at one point, because he had a fever, he groaned a little bit. And one of the new brahmacharis who joined the ashram, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and eager to impart lessons to all, including seniors in the room, turned around from brushing his teeth and said to Mahamuni, Prabhu, you're not your body. To which Mahamuni gathered all his strength, got up on one elbow, peeked out of his sleeping bag and said, Prabhu, you're not my body either. And so even as we're in the process of devotional service, we should have compassion that we're going through similar trials and tribulations in this world. We have to show compassion on both levels. We don't become indifferent, cold, artificially stoic in the face of disaster, because people do have a body and mind. Even devotees have it. And they go through those type of things. So it goes, those type of things means the grieving process. So it's a holistic approach that we have. Not simply we isolate the philosophy and say, we only deal with it in this way. We deal with it in every way possible. And the second question?
Yes, Maharaj. The prayers here by Queen Kunti seem very, very exalted. Like, I mean, as a conditioned soul, I hardly can keep up with my own tribulations, but here Queen Kunti is asking to let this happen again and again because I will, have your darshan. Is this something we should even remotely try to aspire for? Because when we have these teachable moments, we try to relate to Krishna.
It's not necessarily that she's calling for more. There's different ways of looking at the verse. What she's doing, and this is a very subtle difference, is admitting that they're coming anyway. So it's more in the mood of, all right, let them come. You're here, what's done is done. You came, what can I do? All I can do now is surrender to Krishna. And then she takes it one step further and said, because they're coming anyway, I'm going to use them as an opportunity to go deeper within my practice. That's our recourse. That's, in fact, the only recourse, because counteracting material calamities is not possible. This is one of the points that Prahlad Maharaj says, that the remedy that people take in the material world for maladies is often worse than the original malady itself. Doctors? You take medicine and it's like, okay, they advertise, pharmaceutical companies. They have a 2-minute advertisement. The first 5 seconds talks about how it'll help you breathe better when there's pollen in the air. And the other 1 minute and 55 seconds is a person talking in a low voice with small print going across the screen, telling all the ways that it could really mess you up. Including at the end. They say it as fast as they can, and it could even death. So, there's a way in which the Kunti Devi is admitting that the material world, what we all know, it's the elephant in the room. Because everyone wants to pretend like it's okay. Prabhupada used to make this point. He said, you go to the hospital, friends there, tubes coming out of every orifice. You can barely move. He says, how are you? Fine. And Prabhupada wrote in a poem before he came to America, he said, this is the fine of the material world. And it's an embarrassment. Something happens to us and then we don't want to admit it because, after all, we are eternal, but our bodies aren't. And we identify with our bodies and therefore we think, keep up. Would you keep up? And it doesn't necessarily keep up. There's things that happen and we think, and someone says, oh, what happened to you? It's like, oh, nothing. I'll just, throw something on that. How come your hair changed color? It's like, no problem. I'll just, everything's changing, moving. There's a verse in the 11th canto about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu where it's described that when you take shelter of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you can become freed from the embarrassments of material life. And what's the embarrassment? That you identify with the body, then you're going to be embarrassed. But you don't have to do that. You can join the saints and just say, okay, I'm in a body, I'll tolerate what happens, I'll do the best I can to take care of it, that's necessary, but I won't fully invest in the material world. Yes. 1, 2. 1, 2. 3.
Hi, Krishna. It's a little bit of a follow-up from the previous question. So I was just wondering that sometimes during, especially heavy calamities or verses like for example, our body, mind, our heart, our soul are not aligned together. So for example, our mind may be disturbed, your body is diseased, etc. So what exactly does real shelter actually mean? Is it something like practical? Is it an emotion? What exactly is it? If you go, like you're mentioning about going deeper into practice, but for example, if the mind is disturbed or the body is diseased, how do you practically go deeper into shelter? So what exactly is real shelter?
One aspect is your seva. because whatever happens, we go on with our service one way or another. You can take the example of Prabhupada. When his body was diminished greatly, he was lying on his back, and he had Jayadvaita Maharaj and Pradyumna with him in Vrindavan. These were in his final days. There's pictures of it. A little dictaphone that Gargamuni had purchased for him. They had to hold it right in front of his mouth. Prabhupada couldn't run it like he used to. Somebody else held it. And then you can see the picture of them holding the book above Prabhupada like this. Prabhupada is not eating, drinking. His body is finished, basically. But his service goes on. And there he is, and you can read it. It's in the 10th canto, 13th chapter. That's the same words Prabhupada spoke. They're absolutely lucid. And there's no sense of, I'm really ill while I'm saying this. It's just lucid. Krishna Katha. And when we are going through whatever we go through, we're able to take shelter of our service. This is real shelter. If you physically can't do it, then our main service is chanting Hare Krishna. That's why we practice. Sampadi, Vipadi. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, keep practicing in any circumstance because this is our real shelter. We saw Rajendra Nanda Prabhu, my dear friend, who got a sudden notice that he had a week to live. Sudden notice. He just thought he had a knot in his back and tried to get massage for it. And then he went to a doctor finally and they said, no, this is finished. Body finished. You have 1 week. They wouldn't even let him go home without hospice at home. And he immediately took shelter of hearing and chanting. 100%, 24/7, nothing else. Because he had practiced it. In fact, I remember Rajendra Nanda, he always came to our yatras. He came to me one yatra, he said, Vaish, I only want to hear. And when he sang Guru Puja, I remember once in Jagannath Puri, the devotees cried. He sang with such heart. Some people sing it musically and it's beautiful, but he sang it with such heart. Not a great singer mechanically, but he sang with such emotion in his voice that the other devotees had tears in their eyes that, wow, this is a real Guru Puja. And when the time came, he just took shelter of that all I have is my spiritual master, all I have is my service to my spiritual master. So Prabhupada did that. Bhishma Dev did it. He was on a bed of arrows and he just showed this is what you do. You keep your service in all circumstances. Never stop chanting Hare Krishna. No matter who says what to whom, you just keep chanting. In all circumstances. Grihe tako, bani tako, shada hari boli tako. Wherever you live, wherever you are, go on with your service. That's real shelter. And we always have that.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Thank you for coming to Toronto, spending some time with us here.
Thank you for coming to Toronto. She comes all the way.
Thank the temple for giving me a place to stay here and get some benefits.
Good work, Temple.
I just wanted to share my takeaways from all your sessions that I attended here. From yesterday's session, you said, don't claim to be incompetent forever. I felt that was targeted to me directly. Because every time I see you, I always complain about my life, cry, and throat dry from suffering. So now I got that message, don't claim to be incompetent forever. I'm taking that with me. And it's your fault if you can't take advantage of the holy name. So it's my fault if I can't take advantage of the holy name. And whatever good things that happens to me or somebody praises me or appreciates me, it's not me, it's the mercy of my Guru Maharaj. And you also said, protect your service and service will protect you. You repeated that as well now. few minutes ago. So I'm taking that with me. And from today's session, you said, take shelter of the Lord and tolerate other habits. And if I do that, I will definitely have a rebirth. My life is for reformation or purification, so I accept this. And use every day to upgrade my consciousness. And from this morning's session, you talked about Buddha Suddhi. That was really touching me, Buddha Suddhi and Sankalpa. Start with the Sankalpa. And then concentrate your mind on the sound vibration of the mantra, and everything will be revealed to you one after the other. Form, qualities, pastimes, etc. And sit tight, chant loud until you feel one minded to the lotus feet of Krishna. And you also mentioned about chanting with special care, and you explained what special care means, like not diverting your attention to something else. You also gave us an example of how you would feel if somebody, when I'm talking, if somebody watches and looks at the clock or looks elsewhere, not paying attention, so I should pay special attention when I'm chanting. And that's called chanting with care. And the one other thing that struck me was, you improve every day or you will fail. So these are the lessons I'm taking away with me. And now I have only one question. So you were quoting several verses when you were giving class this morning. How do you remember all those verses? Because you encourage us to memorize verses, right? Like we do chant and we also practice Bhagavatam verses, try to memorize everything. But then last time when I memorized chapter 9, when I started memorizing chapter 10, I forget the 9. I lose that. So any tips or advice on how to hold everything in your memory will be?
It's just Krishna's mercy. If you serve the verses and Krishna allows you to remember them, and oftentimes when people lose their memory, if they're devotees, then Krishna allows them just to remember Him. I know a devotee who had Alzheimer's and he lost his memory, but the only thing he didn't lose was chanting Hare Krishna. It's the one thing he remembered. It's kind of mercy because we remember so many things. People say, can I remember my past life? It's like, why would you want to? You'll just become neurotic if you can remember all that. We just want to remember Krishna. I was fortunate to join a movement that's bona fide, and then we'd listen to Prabhupada and he was always quoting verses. It just became part of the culture. Prabhupada would always say, find out that verse, find out this verse. He said to us, read the books and so forth. So there's a culture of hearing, just constantly hearing, and I'm a mercy case, somehow just walked into the right room at the right time, and then they didn't kick me out. So I'd hang out in the corner and listen to the devotees, and then it just sort of stuck, because that's what the human mind does. It's quite an apparatus. You have a human body. You remember stuff. And if you just adjust the way you take in information from the world and try to be as exclusive as you can in hearing Shastra and Krishna Katha, then that's what will stick for anybody. And everyone remembers things in different ways. But in general, the main technique for memorizing is repetition, and also you have to really apply yourself to it. And don't be afraid to go deeper and deeper into it. It's the mind. When we had a challenge to memorize all the verses from Prahlad Maharaj's prayers, and I got into a kind of a state where I was just lock myself in my room and just over and over again, looking at the verses, chanting them, trying to remember them. I made codes, first a word from every verse, and I made those into, what do you call those? Mnemonics. So I had all those together, and I was just grinding and grinding and grinding it, and then I started remembering, and I thought, most of the time, my brain's just like mush, because I don't apply it to anything. Somebody says their name, my name's Bob, and 2 minutes later I go, what's your name? Most of the organs, when they're not being used for a higher purpose, they just kind of shut down, like on your phone. It's like, you're not using me, right? No, go down. So you just have to apply your brain. My brother's a musician. I asked him once, how do you learn all that? And he said, you really have to get absorbed in it. Just go over and over it again. And it's the same. Human brain's powerful. And it's especially built for Shastras. So you can do it. Anybody can do it. You just have to keep doing it over and over again, and then use it whenever you can. Especially, you can memorize something, and then if you sit down to give class and everyone's looking at you, you're going like, it's almost like walking a tightrope. I'm going to fall off halfway through. But the more you do it, the more confident you'll get. And it's important, because if you're able to represent the Sampradaya by quoting at least Bhagavad Gita regularly, then you have some authority. Hare Krishna. Yeah, one more question and we're out. Then Obama out.
Krishna, thank you very much. Wonderful class and conversation. Couple points from last class. You mentioned almost all points, but one is like fast from taking any credit.
What a credit fast.
You should try to find someone who chastises us. One from today's class that like if you try to adjust the material calamities, we get like deeper and deeper into them. Like we should only take shelter of Krishna. And one question, like when it comes to surrender and when it comes to calamities, when it comes on ourselves, we sometimes are able to do it, but when it comes to our loved ones, it gets very hard to not get affected by them.
Yeah, it kind of amplifies, because we get more absorbed in the people we love. But if you spend time with them, you'll realize they're also spirit souls. Even if they're not practicing devotees, living entities are smart, because they're part of Krishna. And ultimately they are spiritual beings. So they're not completely unaware of the fact that they're not their bodies. Although there's a heavy influence of illusion if you live in a life of wanton sense gratification. You tend to get attached to so many things. But what I've found is anyone I've been around, whether they practice heavily or not, they have some sense near the end of life of their existential nature as not being their body. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that a wise person laments neither for the living nor the dead. Again, it goes back to, we should show compassion to everybody, knowing that even if the suffering they're going through is illusory like that in a dream, it still hurts. So we should show compassion to them, but at the same time we should stoically be there to present the fact that you're not your body. And I've seen it many times when those who are helping others come into a situation where people are suffering, they're able to give some philosophy to relieve them. Philosophy means you're just able to rise above the life situation that you're attached to right now. For instance, if your car gets hit and your friend, who's your best friend? Who? Aya? Nayan. Car gets hit, so Nayan comes over your house and you're lamenting because your car got hit, and Nayan gives you a little philosophy. And Nayan says, Prabhu, it's just a car. How do you feel now? Much better. He gave you some deep philosophy, it's just a car. So anybody, you can help them by holding your hand. And then my last point, because You mentioned that I had said you need somebody to chastise you. You also need somebody who can have compassion and commiserate with you. It's nice to have a God brother who can understand what you're going through and help you through it. God brother, God sister. And I said God brother because I was thinking about one time when I was in deep anxiety. It was a managerial nightmare for me, something that happened in our community in ISV, which I'm very attached to. And I brought that anxiety with me to Vrindavan for Kartik, and I was trying to find some relief by talking to God brothers, and then I met His Holiness Gopal Kṛṣṇa Maharaj in front of the MBT office, and I started bemoaning my fate in front of him. He grabbed my hand, and we just stood there for about 5 minutes and he just held my hand. He didn't say much, he just said, "It's a cruel world." But the fact that he held my hand like an older brother, I was just remembering this because they asked me to make a memorial, offering to Maharaj for his 80th Vyasa Puja. And I was just remembering that moment. It went right to my heart. I actually felt okay because a God brother held my hand. He just held it 5 minutes while I complained and felt overwhelmed by the situation. And there's nothing he could have said, "Here's how you're going to fix it." But the fact that he held my hand gave me solace. So in a community of devotees, we should know that we're all going through very difficult times. There's not one person that's not experiencing some deep anxiety somewhere. It's the nature of the material world. So in a community of devotees, we should have that sense, whose hand can I hold when they're going through this? Not just who can I chastise, but whose hand can I hold? Because we really only get through it holistically together, to put together a whole lifetime, helping one another to stay close to Krishna. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Gauranitai, Shri Shri Radhakir Chor Gopinath, Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, if you so desire, please let us always see your hand in everything that happens to us in our life and take it as an opportunity to go deeper into our service. Please let us be tolerant of the minor trespasses of those around us and be compassionate, well-wishing friends. And please also inspire everyone to come out on Sankirtan today so that we can experience what it's like to go out into the great unknown and take a risk for Krishna and tolerate being rejected, although I doubt that will happen at all. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna. Vanchakalptaruscha kripasinabheva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.